Times change. The marketing landscape changes. One thing that's been solid as a rock for decades is email. For scaling brands, we find that 65% of revenue in Klaviyo comes from buyers. And on a 7-day last click, we find that customer retention is 10 times more cost-effective than ads. Conversion rate optimization is even more cost-effective. Translation: if you aren't doing email, SMS, and CRO, you're spinning your wheels on new customers and spending way too much to drive revenue. Unfortunately, with the growth of e-commerce and the onslaught of email, Gmail and Yahoo are making it harder than ever to reach the inbox. The cheapest customer is the customer you already have, so if you need help with this mess, come to pallethouse.co, fill out the lead form, and ask to speak to me directly.
In the inbox late night, glowing screen, see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
The financial case for CRO. This is an advertising campaign firing on all cylinders. This is a killer ad campaign. And what do we get here? Rather than losing $50,000 in opportunity cost, you almost double your margin. People who've got conversion rate of 0.5%, and they're like, hey, should I advertise? My God, no. At all times, your low-cost revenue should be maximized. You've built up your domain, you're getting traffic automatically. Hey, take that traffic and turn it into orders. That's how you drive revenue. That's your business. It's the world's best email retention podcast, and I'm your host, Jordan Gordon. We are a member of the DTC network of podcasts and the philosophical home of the Pilot House email and customer retention team. If you want to make the sweet nectar of low-cost revenue a large part of your digital ecosystem, then follow us on your favorite podcast app today. This time we're going to go through the financial case for CRO. I see this plenty in my audits. Someone comes through and they have a conversion rate of 0.5%. And I mean, if you go back a few episodes, I broke down benchmarks and so large kind of 8-figure brands, they're running their site professionally, but they're also doing reach advertising and kind of awareness advertising and driving plenty of unqualified traffic. They're converting at 2%. That's just totally normal. So someone comes through and they're converting at 0.5%. And considering advertising, right? Okay. Well, look, I'm just going to break this down with a nice, simple spreadsheet that everyone can follow through on this with me to see why, what that brand should be doing is working on their website right now and before advertising, and at least getting yourself closer to a benchmark, because if you are far below the benchmark, that you're going to have, it's just going to be lower hanging fruit. So we'll go through the results from advertising more for that brand or doing CRO. And I'm not using a site conversion of 0.5% here, by the way. I'm just using a site conversion of 1% and getting it to 1.5, and which is nowhere near it's not as aggressive as that 0.5%. And I'm just going to do some normal advertising on a domain that is doing $2 million a year. Okay, let's get started. We have here in column B, state 1, no change. That's just steady state. And then we have state 2, where we spend a bunch more on advertising, and state 3, where we do CRO, where we improve the website. And we can just see how things scale. So on state 2, where we scale spend, we're going to apply a scaling factor of 1.5. You'll see where that is. But also we scale owned traffic as well. So I'm breaking this down by domain visits, paid and owned, domain revenue, paid and owned. And I'm just saying, in the steady state, half of the business is paid traffic, half of the business is owned traffic, being organic, email, etc. Direct. So on the paid traffic, I also scale owned. So I say, look, I'm being very generous to paid advertising here. I'm saying look, you're not just driving revenue, you're actually doing your job. This is a professional and proper advertising system that actually bumps owned traffic too. So I'm putting in here, you spend on advertising and you also get more people, typing your brand directly in the browser And it's proper advertising, not just doing a bunch of buy campaigns for people who are ready to buy. So let me just walk through state 1, and then we'll talk about state 2 and state 3. We'll just go step by step. So we got 2 million visits for state 1, pre-change, and it's 1 million paid visits, 1 million owned visits. Site conversion of percent, AOV $100. AOV is $100 across all. So you just do the math, and domain revenue is $2 million, paid is $1 million, owned is $1 million. So the MER, that would just be ad spend as a share of domain revenue. I've got 20%, so you're spending $400,000 on advertising. And that gives you an ROI of 2.5. So you got a platform ROI. Well, sorry, not platform. That is, however you're attributing your paid revenue divided by cost, 2.5. And then we have cost of goods sold, 50%. So, cost of goods sold in that $2 million business, $1 million. And what do we have for margin? $600,000. So that's, obviously that's what you're going to be taxed on by Uncle Sam or whoever your state authority is. All right. So we're going to pump paid. What do we do here? We keep that site conversion of 1%. We're not going to be iterating on the site. We're just spending on paid. See this tons. Someone comes up, they're thinking about spending money on a site that's running at half benchmark. They're thinking about spending more on advertising when they're already advertising. They've already got an MER, in this case, 20%. They're already spending every year. So what do? We scaled the visits by 1.5. So scale from paid is 1.5. And we also scaled the MER at 1.5. So MER, cost as a share of domain revenue, went from 20% to 30%. This is, again, very generous to advertising. Like when you increase your advertising activities, you're already advertising to the low-hanging fruit. Of course you're advertising to the low-hanging fruit. So you start going up and you start grabbing higher hanging fruit and your results get worse. So if you scale advertising by 1.5 at like revenue and traffic, you should be scaling your MER more than 1.5. But we're just doing 1.5 across the board, very generous to advertising. And also, like I said, we scaled owned visits by 1.25 and no increase to spend. So this is an advertising campaign firing on all cylinders. This is a killer ad campaign, right? And what did we get here? Well, we went to 2.75 million visits, 1.5 million for paid, 1.25 for owned. We kept the same site conversion, same AOV. We got domain revenue, 2.75 million from paid $1.5 million and owned $1.25 million. With that MER of 30%, we are spending $825,000 now rather than $400,000. We've doubled ad spend and we're down to a paid ROI of 1.8. So obviously still profitable on an ROI basis, but double our spend. Same COGS at 50%. So we end up with 1.375 million. And what's the margin? What's the final take home on this? 550. And you know what? In all honesty, I did not cook this. That ended up just being $50,000 less. I just went through and plugged all this stuff in. You can see I'm using super round stuff, 1.5, 1.25. And I ran it and the margin's actually less. You actually ended up making less money by growing your business this way, And then on the more CRO. So what do? We scale from spend 1, so 1.0, no scale. Scale to owned, 1.0, no scale. We're not advertising. We're not growing top of funnel. We're not bringing in more eyes. We're just scaling conversion rate by 1.5. So moving that 1% to 1.5%, right? Other stuff, static. So after scaling site conversion to 1.5%, what happens then? Well, we got the same 2 million domain visits, 1 million paid, 1 million owned. But then we end up with 3 million in domain revenue, 1.5 million paid, 1.5 million owned. So actually, domain revenue went up more than when we spent, right? Of course, because you've got 50% more people converting on the same traffic. So domain revenue went, rather than going from 2 to 2.75, it goes from 2 to 3. ROI, the paid ROI stays 2.5. MER, I kept the MER at 20%. I mean, all that stuff's the same, right? So look, your ROI didn't get worse. Your kind of marketing ratios didn't get worse. You look like a champion, right? To whoever, your bank or your boss or whoever, whatever overlord you serve, you look like a champion. Okay. Paid spend, 600,000. Okay. Paid spend. I have paid spend going up here, just because I've got the MER staying at 20%. Actually, let's just hot fix that because that doesn't make any sense, right? We know that the paid spend is the same. So let's actually change this and we'll say, what is this divided by this? There we go. Let's fix that. All right, hot fix. So actually, look at that. Your paid ROI goes to 3.8 and your MER goes to 13%, down from 20. So you are way more efficient on your spend, like phenomenally more efficient. You look like a super champ. COGS still 50%. So you're spending 1.5 million on goods, and your margin 1.1 million. So rather than losing $50,000 in opportunity cost, you almost double your margin, right? And again, look, I didn't cook these. You saw me. I just hot fixed something right there. I just threw this together because I knew I had to talk about it. We'll say a few more words about it, but first I wanted to just get into the sheet. So this model is super realistic. So what do I see? Again, people who've got like a conversion rate of 0.5%, and they're like, hey, should I advertise? My God, right? My God. No, you should fix your site, right? So here is the way you think about it at the very bottom of the funnel. And it's not a funnel, it's actually a circle. And if you go back to episode 40, where we're talking about the persistent revenue ecosystem, we talk about the circle that is pure play e-commerce advertising. But let's think about it as a funnel. At the very bottom is the shopping cart. First, get your shopping cart working, period. Then get your kind of website working. That's your category pages, for merchandising pages, your PDPs, your category pages for merchandising, and then home and blog and content stuff for content. And then get your email working. So the site's working now. You got your page and everything. Now your email. Why? Because it's really tight to the bottom of the funnel, very low cost. You want to start with the lowest cost stuff, right? So email, you have to pay Klaviyo, so there is a new cost beyond the site. But that's what you do next. And then do your Google, because it's generally speaking to your Google, because it's intent-based. Someone's actively searching. It's just throwing something random in front of somebody. Okay, then you start doing your Meta and your Instagram, maybe TikTok. I don't, right? And so now you are throwing something in front of somebody, but you can be pretty targeted. And then after that, you do your display, where you're going to do like your Google, where you're just throwing videos, tons of videos in front of everybody. It's there's a lot of, we got to go into a lot of work producing a lot of those videos. So yeah, you YouTube, and then, hey, maybe TV, actually do like kind of connected TV, advertising way up at the top of the funnel. That's the order that you do this stuff. Don't go and do that stuff up at the top when you haven't even got your site working properly. And I just modeled it right in front of you. And there's nothing weird about these numbers. This is totally normal, everyday stuff. And simply put, there is no big company I have ever worked for who wasn't doing some form of CRO or site iteration at all times. It is always on. Because you don't just plant a garden and walk away. If you build the site and then you walk away from it in a year, there's a bunch of stuff that's not going to be doing what it should be doing because the kind of traffic you're driving has changed, or some app has been updated, or whatever, right? So this must be an always on activity. And wow, do I see this too? Some companies got, maybe they might be spending $1 million a year on ad spend, for instance, right? Kind of the biggest clients we work with right now, it's above 10 million, right? At least for clients that I work with. Our advertising team has all kinds of crazy stuff going on, but just clients that we work with, right? Can certainly spend above 10 million. But let's just think about and they usually have it figured out, right? They're doing something. They got that big because they got it figured out. So, I'm just talking to them to say, can we do better with your CRO, right? But let's say you're this brand that's spending $1 million and don't currently have any site iteration activities going on, right? It's just like when something comes up, right? Hey, you get an idea, you give it a try. It's like, Well, look at this. And so it certainly happens that people are spending like $1 million a year on advertising, and then they're ho-humming about whether or not they should be spending a few $1,000s a month, whatever it costs, whatever the retainer is, to have a team of professionals making sure that your site is converting as well as possible, right? Ho-humming on that, whatever it is, some thousands a month when you're spending $1 million a year in advertising. Look at these numbers. Obvious. So we are going to talk. I did this exact same thing for email many episodes ago. I broke it down for you. So here I'm breaking it down for you again for CRO, just the financial case. And what's the take home? This should be obvious. At all times, your low cost revenue should be maximized. You should be maxing your cheap and owned revenue first. Advertising is not for driving revenue. Look, we just showed you, hey, we got to drive some more revenue. Look at this. I just put the case right in front of you. You can actually harm your business using advertising to drive revenue because it's expensive. You drive revenue with your owned channels, your email, your SMS, right? You drive revenue by converting organic traffic, right? So, you've built up your domain. You're getting traffic automatically. Hey, take that traffic and turn it into orders. That's how you drive revenue. That's your business, right? Your owned traffic is your business. And the purpose of advertising is to increase that owned traffic over time. Of course, it's going to drive some revenue, but point being, if you're driving a bunch of traffic to a owned digital ecosystem that doesn't make money, you're not going to make money, right? If you drive that new awareness to a digital ecosystem, an owned digital ecosystem that does make money, you're going to make more money because you're putting more into this thing that makes money. If you put stuff into this thing that doesn't make money, you're not going to make money. Like clear as day. So sorry to be pedantic. No, I'm not. I'm always like this. I'm just spelling it out and speaking it like it is. So we are going to talk more about this in 2026. I've got some content I feel really excited about. So if you have not yet subscribed to the World's Best Email Retention Podcast, please follow us on your favorite podcast app today. So we can go into, some of the models that we use. And the nice thing about that is just boiling it down to its simplest, because the nice thing there is if you are an executive or just, an internet marketer, just trying to make it in the world today, hey, take these models and apply them to your own digital ecosystem for the good of e-commerce in general. And that's why I have this podcast, right? Like, of course, it's supported by an agency. So, I gotta get some clients in now and then from the podcast, but I'm doing this. This is like a passion project for me. So, if you're out there and you're an executive and you've got a professional that maybe got a new task, a new project needs to be pushed in the right direction, show them some of these episodes. You can see here how important it is. And then if you are a marketer, hopefully you listen to this podcast every week. If you're a digital marketer trying to make it in the world today. So we'll discuss more of this. But for now, just look at this. And if you have not yet modeled out your business with changes in your site conversion. Oh yeah, another point. Look, we had a podcast earlier. I had Evan on the pod and we talked about how site conversion is actually a horrible metric. And interestingly, I actually prefer revenue per session. Revenue per session is an awesome metric because it's very, very stable, average. Because you know what? People only spend so much, right? I find the same with revenue per email sent. Revenue per session and revenue per email sent are very stable because if you got a more expensive product, people just convert on less visits. And so you kind of just arrive at these, you know that you can make a certain amount if you drive a visit. A very common email revenue per email sent is $5, for instance. A conversion rate doesn't have that value, doesn't have the dollar value. Also, of course, if you drive a bunch of low quality traffic, and let's just say low quality, it's not necessarily low quality, it might just be low qualified. If you're really pushing awareness, and you're pushing less qualified traffic on the site, it's going to drive your site conversion down. So I did have Taylor on and I asked him directly, because I look at direct in Shopify just to see what's going on. What's the direct conversion rate? And I asked him, like, a little bit worried, like, oh, is he going to, totally trash on me? Because Taylor's a pro. And he said, no, he looks at it all the time. And I was like, whew, thank goodness. Because I do bare my heart for you out in audience land and say all kinds of stuff, and then always just hope that that my tactics are correct. So it's nice when they turns out they are. So I look at direct conversion. Why? Because it does pull out a lot of that noise. Of course, it's not true that direct is someone absolutely typed your domain into their browser, but the platforms are doing the best they can to pull out stuff like known paid traffic, et cetera, et cetera. So direct would just be traffic where we don't, we can't show that it is traffic from any one of these other specific platforms. Plenty of that will be direct, but also some of it will be lossy information that goes into the session pixel that's tracking all this stuff, the session JavaScript, that kind of stuff. So sometimes it's just lossy data. Anyway, it will be more stable over time. And so, I would go home and look at this model and apply a model like this to your ecosystem, and you can work off your direct conversion rate because your direct conversion rate will be more stable over time because it doesn't move as much when you start pushing less qualified traffic. And I feel very comfortable having everybody out there model this for yourselves because it's going to be obvious. You need to be fixing your website at all times. Having a website that performs better beats anything else because every single channel must go through your site. At least in a pure play environment, every single channel must go through your site to convert. And even if it's not a pure play environment, you got Amazon, for instance, you got some stuff on Amazon. Well, look, the same still applies to your advertising. Maybe you can't trace it back, but of course, having your Amazon traffic convert better based on your account, rather than driving a bunch of awareness and driving people to Amazon, the same thing's going to hold. Amazon is just a different cart. You've got your Shopify cart, you've got your Amazon cart. All of this logic applies in that situation as well. And if you have Shopify and Amazon and you're on the shelf, like you're now in Walgreens or wherever you are, we can't talk about fixing site conversion in Walgreens, but we can talk about maybe changing the packaging to make it more clear, or better shelf space, whatever it is. Super not a brick and mortar guy, right? Although I do know that you pay more for stuff that's eye level and you pay less for stuff down at the bottom. Okay, well, you're going to pay for eye level, or you could just have a package that says the right thing. So anyway, whatever, that kind of methodology, this all still applies at all times. Getting someone to convert without advertising spend beats getting someone to convert with advertising spend at all times. And the whole sole purpose in my mind of e-commerce of e-commerce marketing is to get someone to type your DNS name into their browser directly and avoid all other kind of traffic and platforms, and just have them go directly to your site without anybody else in the way. Because everybody else in the way, they're all taking their piece, right? Everybody's taking their piece. So the whole purpose of e-commerce marketing is to drive absolute, true, direct traffic over time by creating a place in your audience's mind for you. All right. Entrepreneurs, executive spammers, and webmasters. Until we meet again, have fun spamming.
In the inbox late night, glowing screens see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
Hey entrepreneurs and spammers, remember, you can't scale without email. And the cheapest customer to acquire is the customer you already have. So please subscribe to the world's best email and retention podcast and learn how to make low-cost revenue a big part of your digital ecosystem.